Oh, I'm sorry. I was just drinking out of my politics mug. So let's talk about this whole Donald Trump immigration H-1B thing. Donald Trump says that we need immigration or H-1B visas because we need people to teach Americans the skills they don't know because Americans can't build missiles? Who's been building our missiles, Donald? Who's been building them all this time? Do you really think that we've outsourced missile production to other countries? And if so, don't you see that as a bit of a problem? Don't you think it's just a little bit of an issue? That's probably the stupidest thing that you've ever said in public. So here's what I really want to go over. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on Donald Trump and Kevin O'Leary supporting H-1B visas. For some reason, everybody somehow magically starts to support H-1B visas in politics. They say all kinds of things against it, and then all of a sudden, oh, the H-1B really isn't that bad. H-1B is actually something that we need. No, we don't. And the rationale is always that H-1B visas fill in gaps that we need filled because Americans don't know how to do it or whatever. And that's a lie. That is a bold-faced lie. What's happening is H-1Bs and immigration, unfettered immigration in this case, but just immigration in general, illegal immigration in particular, all of this stuff plays together to create the problems that supposedly more of them will then solve. Now, if you drink poison and it makes you sick, do you think drinking more poison will make you better? No, absolutely not. Only a moron would think such a thing, and yet, for some reason, every single person seems to become this exact moron. And we all know why. It's because this services big business interests that have a lot of money, a lot of power, and can do a lot of harm to a lot of people if they don't fall in line. And I can't necessarily blame Donald Trump for this entirely, because we don't know what happens behind the scenes. We don't know what they are threatening him with behind the scenes. For all we know, some asshole somewhere has leverage over him that they're using to make him pull back his commentary on H-1B visas. The thing is, we don't need H-1B visas. We don't need L-1 visas. We don't need any work visas at all. America does not need talent to suddenly be imported from other countries. We don't need it. All Americans can learn how to do jobs. There is no reason that we can't have Americans learn this stuff, and there's no need to bring other people here to do jobs that Americans should be doing just because Americans need to learn this stuff. No, we don't need it. Here's what you do. If Americans need to learn how to do something, you send the Americans overseas to the places where it's being done, and they learn it over there and bring it back here. You have them go take a job somewhere else from someone else and bring it back here. This proposal seems so simple that it's astonishing to think that nobody's thought of it before. Oh, wow, some loser in his car in his driveway filming himself somehow can solve the problem, but everybody in politics somehow can't otherwise? No, this is bull. You know it's bull. All of it is bull. Immigration and H-1B, the way that they cause the problems that they supposedly will solve is you have a bunch of Americans doing a bunch of jobs. In fact, America essentially created tech. What we call tech today. Computers are an American thing. And yes, there were computer efforts underway in all sorts of other countries, Britain, Germany, Russia. A lot of places have their own computer pioneering that was going on. But guess what? Everything. America dominates all of it. We created all of modern technology. And then, because it served the interests of big businesses, we outsourced it all to China, who became the world's exporter. And now, TSMC makes most of the chips that we use every day. And that's part of the problem, is that between H-1B, immigration, and outsourcing to foreign countries, yes, we've shunted a lot of our talent overseas. We've thrown a lot of our manufacturing overseas. We have severe national security deficits, and we have a problem with, there's a bunch of people coming here taking jobs from American citizens and undercutting them. In particular, this is illegals, undercutting them, getting under the table wages, poor working conditions, living 10 to a 2-bedroom apartment, just because they are willing to do that, because where they came from, they would basically sleep in their own poop and roach piles and such. They come from somewhere really disgusting, so they're come here and they're willing to settle for a much lower standard of living than an American is, which means everybody's standard of living goes down as a result, because now you have Americans losing access to housing, because why would a landlord rent to 1 or 2 people for one price when they can rent to 6 or 8 people, especially if some of it's under the table, for a much higher total price? That's basic supply and demand. And this is the problem, is that even if you have a so-called free market, if the free market is tainted by forces that interfere with it in any way, and we don't think of like people coming in, illegally immigrating, we don't think of it inherently as, oh, that's tampering with the free market, but someone had to let that in. Someone had to set a policy that allowed that in. So H-1B is a legal form of migration. Illegal immigration is an illegal form of immigration, and both of them increase demand on systems. Systems of housing, systems of roads, systems of various utilities, phone, internet, water, sewer, the infrastructure in the U.S. And the problem is, we can't pay for maintaining our own infrastructure. Americans can't afford housing. Food prices have gone through the roof. Well, guess what happens if you get rid of all these people that are making all these things? These systems are under massive strain. If you take some people off of the bridge is under less stress. So you remove these people, suddenly we can afford to maintain our infrastructure, because guess what? If you don't have 2 or 3 times the crap happening in an area, suddenly that area has 1/3 the stress on the systems. Suddenly the bridges need 1/3 less maintenance. Suddenly everything has a lot less pulling it down. And yes, this will hurt big businesses. This will hurt small businesses in the short term, because now there's not a total number of people that are requiring food or whatever. But over time, what happens is the Americans who couldn't get jobs and the Americans who couldn't get housing, now, since you have a lower amount of people trying to get those jobs, the simple laws of supply and demand take over. There's less supply, which means that now there's more demand than supply, which means workers can negotiate their wages. Workers can ask for more wages. Workers can ask for lower housing costs, because there's more supply than there is demand, which puts workers in a favorable position. Importing 42 million illegal immigrants from another country or various other countries puts massive strain on the housing systems here, massive strain on the food and the roads and so on here. Importing millions of H-1B visa holders puts even more strain on the systems here. Plus, all of these people are sending their money out of the country. Plus, now that Americans can't get housing, can't get a job, have trouble buying food, guess what they don't do? They don't have babies. That's right. Who's going to start a family they can't afford? Well, only people on government welfare, of course, which is why the stupid people keep reproducing and the smart people don't. Because the smart people are smart enough not to reproduce irresponsibly, while the stupid people just keep on sticking the thing into hoo-ha and pumping out babies, and the government just keeps going, well, you got another kid? Here's some more EBT money. Here's some more. We're paying you to have more babies. More stupid, government-dependent, poor babies that are going to be delinquents in schools, break laws, and harm the society overall. The government is literally paying for the downfall of society in this manner. But when it comes to middle class or even upper middle class Americans, screw you. You don't get shit. Why? Because it's not in the interest of big businesses. We need those wages to be down so we can make more money. And this is the problem. They'll take these little windows of, oh, there's a problem with the fertility rate, or, oh, housing costs are so high, or there's not enough jobs, or whatever. They'll take a little snapshot of that and go, we need to bring in more people from somewhere else to have babies because fertility's fallen below the replacement rate for actual Americans. So we need to bring in babies from other countries that may not be culturally compatible, other countries that have a lower standard of living. So we need to make life more miserable for everyone in America just so that the numbers can stay up. Well, ask yourself, why do the population numbers need to stay up in America? Who is driving this? And that's the ultimate problem. When I hear shit about fertility rates, or I hear about anything that comes down to a number of people that need to exist here, ask the more fundamental question, why does that number need to stay where it is? If there's 330 or 340 million people in the US, why does there need to be 330 or 340 million people in the US? The answer is there doesn't. That number only needs to stay up because if that number's high, it means more economic things. It means numbers go up. It means more economic activity for businesses, especially the big businesses that, by the way, you know, all that red tape that's supposed to like protect consumers or make business fair. Yeah, the big businesses can afford to deal with that red tape. The little guys cannot. So the little businesses don't have a chance to compete with the big businesses because they don't have teams of lawyers and the ability to navigate all this stuff. Do you really think that Google, YouTube, whatever, do you think they really want, if they were operating YouTube, for example, do you really think that they want like copyright law or age verification laws or any of that regulatory stuff that would require them to do more stuff? Do you think that they want that they want that extra burden placed on them? If the answer is no, why would they want that? That's stupid. That means that they have to do even more work. That means it becomes even harder for them to do business. That means that they have to work harder. Well, you would be wrong. You would be dead wrong. And why are you wrong? Because Google, let's just take YouTube as an example. If YouTube, for example, let's say that Google somehow, like, there's a law being passed that protects the children or whatever, that requires age verification. Well, guess what? If Google partners with some age verification provider or becomes one themselves, now I start let's just call the website Rumblesee. Okay? Well, I start a video site called Rumblesee. Well, now the law says I, Rumblesee, have to age verify anybody that wants to come to my site, or I could face legal liability. So now I have a regulatory hurdle that, and age verification is not cheap. You've got to do all kinds of stuff on the back end. Like the AI age verification requires that you use AI crap, which, by the way, requires massive data centers that cost literal hundreds of millions of dollars and runs up energy charges for everyone because guess what? They give the data center subsidies and then put it off onto the consumers nearby. But massive data centers, access to massive data centers full of AI equipment and AI models that are pre-trained and so on. So big tech companies want regulatory challenges in place to keep competition out. And this is the problem, is that all of this comes back to keeping out competition and maximizing returns. If you look at everything and you follow the money, always follow the money. H-1B, how does that maximize returns for businesses? It keeps the population up. These people are, while they are legal immigrants, they also will accept, they'll do work for no pay. After, they won't demand overtime, for example. They're effectively slaves to the company, legalized slavery of a sort. They're more like legalized indentured servants because there are some rules that apply to them. But for the most part, H-1Bs are sort of like high-end slaves. Illegals, they get paid under the table. They're willing to take whatever they can get. They're sending most of that money out of the economy, by the way, as are the H-1Bs. Also, by the way, the H-1Bs and illegals and such, massive amounts of in-group preference. You get a company full of Indian guys on H-1Bs that start becoming managers and making hiring decisions. You're not getting very many white people hired, okay? That's just it. And the majority of America is still white. So, yeah, there is a very obvious in-group preference away from actual Americans and over to Indians being imported from India. Because guess what? That's their people. That's not everybody else. White Americans, black Americans, Asian Americans. Screw you. No, we're hiring all Indians now. Haven't you noticed that when an Indian becomes a CEO, the company suddenly becomes full of Indians? Like, say, Google. Tons and tons of Indians. Microsoft? Tons and tons of Indians. You ever try to get a question answered on Microsoft Answers? Tons and tons of Indians. It's always some guy named Satya, or whatever, that is answering you in speech that always, for some reason, the English is okay, but kindly gets used a lot. You ever notice that? Yeah, and even if it's a supposedly American name, kindly gets used inappropriately a lot. So there's all these ways that the American citizen loses out. And these pressures, that they'll say that we need more people. They'll say that, we need to keep the economy going, or we need to, that we're not replacing people. The population's going to drop and it's going to be disastrous for the economy. It's always about the economy. It's about the economy because you made it about the economy when you had all these people come in, undercut the Americans. Now the Americans aren't having babies. Now the Americans aren't buying stuff. But if you import these people and you pay them less, they have less money to buy stuff from you too. So now the Americans don't have money. The people that were brought here don't have money. The Americans have a lower standard of living. The people that were brought here have a lower standard of living. I mean, they have a raised standard of living for themselves relative to where they came from, maybe, but they've dragged down the standard of living for everybody else. It is a race to the bottom. And that is ultimately the problem with this entire thing. It's an economic race to the bottom. In chasing this ideal of we need to maximize profits, they manage to, because we have corporatism, we don't have capitalism. Capitalism is free markets. It's basically people make decisions based on their own needs, wants, and market pressures reflect basically their communication signals for, what is needed, what is not. Your business goes out of business because you're selling something no one wants to buy, for example. But if the government comes along and says, well, health insurance is mandatory and will actually tax you if you don't buy from it, there you go. We live in a regulatory environment that is so brutal that small businesses have no way to compete. Regular market forces are shot. So then they bring in all these people and put more pressure on the system to push everybody down. But now these businesses have cheaper workers, so they can make the prices cheaper, or at least temporarily, but there is an inflationary aspect to bringing more people in. So it's this vicious cycle. Basically, this is sort of, it's a form of suicidal empathy almost. And it's in service to large corporations, mostly multinational conglomerates, these massive companies having their hooks in the regulatory environment that keep them entrenched. The irony is, if the red tape were removed, if the people that are not supposed to be here were removed, then, and the free market was just allowed to exist without all of this crap, grabbing it by the neck with a belt and dragging it around. If you would just let the market decide and get rid of all of these perverse forces, you wouldn't have this problem at all. Because if the market can communicate signals accurately instead of acting like an infected host that can't send the chemical signals back and forth properly, if you just let the market exist the way it's supposed to be, without illegal immigrants, without H-1Bs imported, the problems solve themselves. It is also not a legitimate function of government to do this kind of thing. The government is not supposed to be importing millions of people from other countries to shore up big businesses' profits. They're not supposed to do that. The government, the federal government in particular, their job is to defend us, to do treaties with other countries, basically do international dealings for us, and they're supposed to some extent, look out for the welfare of the citizens, but not like that. They're not supposed to be interfering in the free market itself. They are supposed to do, it's mainly national defense, and the last thing that they're supposed to do is interstate dispute resolution. So really, imagine if the federal government were pared back to just that. Imagine if they didn't allow random people in, like a bunch of people to work. You can't work here if an American would do the job. And if somebody's trying to pull some shady stuff to make it like Americans aren't doing the job, which is what happens, by the way, there is, what is that website called? It's like Jobs Now or something. where they dig up all the H-1B jobs, they dig up all the perm jobs that you're not supposed to know about, and then Americans can go and apply to those jobs so that they can't hire an H-1B because, hey, there's plenty of unemployed Americans. And I'm going to tell you right now, there is enough talent in this country. There are so many American citizen computer science majors that have been fired from Google and Facebook and Amazon and all of them that have massive amounts of capability that are not working to their full potential, not because they can't, but because the companies won't hire them over some Indian guy that they can make their slave. There's more than enough Americans that can do it, and we don't need someone else to teach us how to do it. We already have the skills here, because I swear to God, if we're making missiles in another country, I probably should just stop now, because I'm about to get really, really angry, and I'm about to just spew off a bunch of curse words and slurs and other things, and it's not going to be pleasant. So I think that you've gotten the point. Thanks for listening to this point. I'm going to go back inside because I really need to refill this coffee mug. This is exactly how I feel. And by the way, don't ask me where I got the mug. It was a gift. I have no idea where you can get this, but this is this video. This is exactly what's going on. Let me tell you why. Thanks. Have a good one.